I am confident that I would have been hurt or even killed last night had I been leaving alone. This happened last night, almost 24 hours ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. I, 26 female, hijabi, was alone in an all-night fast food joint in a small town last night, about half an hour outside of my city, for about an hour and a half. I'd gone into town with my partner, because we wanted to enjoy the drive there and back together, but he had stuff to do that I didn't accompany him for. I spent the time in town alone, journaling and nursing a drink in a booth at this restaurant. For context, I was wearing a hijab in a town that has 8 churches and a population of 1,800. I hadn't been particularly worried about it, but it's worth mentioning. It was also already dark when we got there, at about 6:30. At one point, a car had pulled into the parking spot right next to my booth's window. I'd been there for like an hour, was deeply immersed in what I was writing, and was only pausing to sip the hot drink and crack my knuckles or stretch my hands. I noticed the car outside was pointed right at me, and was running. It had its headlights on, but I didn't bother to really look until it flashed its high beams at me. After 5-10 minutes, and I glanced, thinking maybe my partner was waiting for me outside. It wasn't his car, so I went back to writing. I assume now that the flash was a test to see if I was paying attention to my surroundings. At some point later, I became aware of a dude standing between my booth and the counter, where someone might naturally stand and wait for their order, though I never saw him receive any food, or drinks, or anything. After I finished this paragraph I'd been writing, I looked up at him, and he was staring. Like, totally staring. And he had this fucked up way of looking at me. He looked at me like a fucking stain on a new pair of slacks. Like he was angry at me, but his face and general energy were emotionless. Still, his stare was definitively hostile. He turned around. I went back to writing because I knew my partner was going to be showing up soon. The dude kept standing around. I could see him facing me again from the corner of my eye, and he soon moved to the other side of the restaurant, where he was closer to being in my blind spot. IDK if I can explain this, but there was a wall/partition between the corner where I was sitting and the other side of the dining area, so he needed to be basically in front of me, or sort of behind me, in order to see me from a distance. Had he been directly next to me and that far away, we would have been totally blind to each other, if that makes sense. He would have been behind this partition. Anyway, at this point he's closer to the door than the counter, sort of behind where I'm sitting, but I can see him in my peripheral vision without fully turning my head. When I start packing my things quickly, because I'm not fucking sticking around to talk to this guy, he starts slowly moving into the vestibule between the outdoor doors and indoor doors. I see him see me, throw my garbage/leftovers in the trash, and return to my booth. I sit for a moment and check my phone before standing up, at which point I see him standing with his back to me, but with his head turned back towards me. I grab my park-end purse, at which point he steps outside and stands there, right in front of the doors, like he was blocking one door but he left just enough room for someone to get past him. I would have had to get real close to him. Instead, I grabbed my stuff and went to the back of the restaurant and went into the bathroom, and I swear I caught him turning his head towards me when I started moving away from him. My partner texted me that he was there. I said I'd be right there, and I was just washing up. I left the bathroom, and this fucking guy is back inside, facing the doors like he was waiting for a ride or something. I walked right past him into the vestibule, and he was not subtle about staring as I did. Approaching the exterior doors, I saw him see me try to exit through the wrong door, which would normally be embarrassing lol, but I was over it. And then his face stayed turned towards me as I walked past the car that had blinked its high beams at me, which I assume was his car, and get to my partner's car. They were parked next to each other, but with one spot in between. My partner happened to have backed into his spot, so the guy inside couldn't see who was driving from inside, just based on where the windows were. He could just see that I got into someone else's car, and he fucking watched me open the front door, say hello, and then open the back door and throw my purse and park in the back seat. For the first time since I caught him staring initially, I clearly looked right at him as I was getting in. He was looking right at me. We pulled out onto the highway and turned past the restaurant. Dude was still staring, like he was far enough away I couldn't see him well, but I could see that his face was turned towards me under his hair and his hat. Hands still in his pockets, like they had been the whole time. And again, at no point did I see him holding even a coffee cup, just standing there for half an hour or so, hands tucked away. A minute later, a car had caught up to us and was following us closely. Closely enough that anyone with anywhere to go would have just passed us, instead of tailing. And then that car turned off of the highway soon after we left town. So my thought is that this fucking guy was blinking his high beams at me to see how much attention I was paying, and then he waited for me to leave to see if I was getting into my own car and driving away alone. I think there were a couple other cars in the lot, which could have belonged to employees. He could have intercepted me easily if another driver, my partner, hadn't been waiting in the lot next to the vehicle that I assumed belonged to him. It would have been so easy for him to pull me into his car with him, because his car was right by the door to the restaurant. From where he was standing just inside and outside of the doors, he could see the staff behind the counter, down the hallway to the bathrooms, the parking lot, and the turn-in from the highway. He could also see if there was anyone else in the dining area, and I don't think there was. And I think that maybe he tailed my partner's car long enough to catch a glimpse of the driver's general shape/size, and roughly confirm whether the driver was a male. Or he may have been following us long enough to get a look at the license plate, which sounds far-fetched, but I'm 100% sure this guy is a fucking monster. Whatever he was thinking, I'm so thankful I didn't leave alone. Let's not meet, dude. Moving to the next one. A man tried to enter my house at 1 a.m. after asking my mom if she was alone. Last night, I was doing my own thing, probably playing dispatch. Honestly, peak game, when the power suddenly went out. This isn't unusual where we live. It happens sometimes because we're in a small town in Mexico. Since there was nothing else to do, I decided to go to sleep. At the same time, my mom was upstairs on a hammock using her phone. The puppies usually follow anyone who moves around, but that night they eventually settled down. She was on a call with someone, and at one point the person asked her if she was alone. She said yes. Later she explained that she thought he meant just her, not including her kids, me and my sister. After the call, she went downstairs, did the dishes, and came to sleep. All of us sleep in the same room because the other rooms are currently used for dogs. Around 1 o'clock to 1:30 a.m. I woke up to knocking outside and whistling. I thought about moving, but my mom immediately whispered very seriously, "Don't move." So I stayed completely still. This part matters. My bed is one of those string beds that makes a lot of noise if you move even a little. There was also no power, no AC, and it was hot. I barely moved the entire time because I was scared of making noise. The man outside walked into our property, knocked on 2 doors, knocked on the front window, and even tried to open the window. Our doors are loud and squeaky, so it was obvious he was trying not to make noise or expose himself. Eventually he stopped and left quietly. What makes this worse is my mom's reaction afterward. My sister and I were scared and couldn't sleep properly. My mom, however, went back to sleep and was snoring like nothing happened. When my sister asked what was going on, my mom lied and said it was probably the dogs trying to get in, even though there was no barking, and the dogs were most likely asleep upstairs. The next day, today, my mom finally told me the truth. The same man who asked her if she was alone was the one who came to the house. She said she plans to tell him that if he does it again, she'll report him to the guards, police, but we live in a very small town with barely any police presence and no clear addresses. Honestly, I'm frustrated. Someone tried to enter our home in the middle of the night, and my mom downplayed it and lied about it instead of prioritizing safety. I don't know what to do next. Should I tell my stepfather? He lives in another country and only speaks Spanish, but I feel like he should know. Moving to the next one. A woman keeps comparing my little sister to her dead granddaughter, and the stories don't add up. My mom basically got kind of forced into a friendship with this woman. She has an adult son, who I've also become friends with. The very first day this woman met my mom, she immediately opened up and told her that her granddaughter passed away 9 months ago, and that her son found her lying dead in her bed. She said the cause of death was SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, which honestly should have been the first red flag, because the granddaughter was around 4 years old, I think, and SIDS only happens to infants. If anything, it would be SUDDC, sudden unexplained death in children, which is extremely rare. Anyway, this woman is very clingy and constantly inserts herself into my mom's plans. She talks about how she envies my mom, and she compliments my 4-year-old sister a lot. She compares her to her dead granddaughter non-stop, and she even sniffed her hair once. Obviously, this all weirded my mom out, so she told me, my intuition is telling me to keep my family away from her. I try to be understanding because I know grief can do strange things to people, and she's also neurodivergent, so maybe she struggles with social cues and boundaries. A couple hours ago, I was sitting with her son and he was showing me pictures of his family back in Utah. He comes across a photo of his niece, and at this point, he doesn't know that I already know she died. My mom told me beforehand because the woman said her son has PTSD and struggles with the death, so my mom warned me not to say anything triggering, which is wild because the mom constantly talks about the granddaughter and shows pictures of her, and it clearly ruins his mood every time. Anyway, he sees the picture and says, "Yeah, this is my niece. She died. Everything went downhill when she died." I comfort him, acting surprised, since he doesn't know I already knew. Then he adds that he found her dead. But then he says, "I found her dead in the bathtub." The mom originally told my mom that her son found the child dead in bed, lying upside down. So now the stories don't match at all. More context. The woman grew up in a Mormon cult and said she was running from someone when she moved from Utah to Oregon, but wouldn't say who. She also told us she watched her daughter's kids a lot, but after the granddaughter died, CPS got involved and they took away the grandson, the other child. My question is, why would CPS remove the other child if the death was truly Sid's, which is out of anyone's control? It doesn't really make sense to me. If the child actually died in the bathtub due to lack of supervision, wouldn't that be considered neglect? And wouldn't that explain why CPS removed the other kid? Between the conflicting stories, the CPS involvement, and the way she's acting toward my little sister, my mom and I both feel really uncomfortable. Are we overthinking this, or does this situation seem genuinely concerning? Moving to the next story. A man stopped me while I was walking home, then told me he'd been looking to hurt someone all night, then followed me. Hello, this is quite a long one, so apologies that it may take a while to tell. I do have to give a little bit of context also. I'm a 22-year-old female, but this story took place when I was 21. I live in a small town, and I work in a pub in the town center, i.e. 2 pubs, 2 small shops, and a bank. On my walk home, I walk past one of the shops, which also has a small bus shelter next to it. Buses run every hour-ish, but none run after 8 p.m. After that, it's just residential housing, and then my house near the end of the road. All in all, from my job and my house, it's about an 8-minute walk. My town is usually dead after about 10 p.m., as everything is closed, and I would genuinely say it was relatively safe. I never had a problem with walking home alone. This incident happened on New Year's Eve, going into New Year's Day, so the pubs were open later. I finished my shift at about 1:30 a.m., and me, my boss, boyfriend, and 2 other coworkers went to the pub next door for a drink before we went home. It was about 2:30 a.m. when I realized what time it was and that I needed to get home. My boyfriend lives on the other side of town, and I wasn't staying at his that night. My boss insisted on driving me home, and I kept insisting that he stays, as everyone else was enjoying themselves and talking about the Christmas period we had at work. Same with my boyfriend. He insisted on walking me home, but I was adamant that I was fine, and it is literally less than 10 minutes. Anyway, after a lot of pushback, I told them I was walking home. I really enjoy walking without headphones, having a cigarette, especially after a shift, because it genuinely is so silent and peaceful. I didn't pass or see anybody until I got to walking past the shop. Like I mentioned previously, there is a small bus shelter next to it, and as I got closer, I realized there was a man sat on the bench in the bus stop. Bear in mind it is nearly 3 a.m., and even the pub we were at wasn't actually open anymore. They just let us in because we worked at the other pub. I didn't really think much of the man, but as I got closer I realized I had served him at my shift earlier on in the night. He looked up as I was walking, and I realized he was sniffing some sort of drug, most likely cocaine, from his keys. I didn't actually know who he was, and still don't, but he didn't seem threatening. He just looked like he was kind of chilling. Probably not the best choice of words. He did meet my eyes though, and I was actually walking past the bus shelter. He said something along the lines of, "Sorry darling, do you have a lighter I can borrow?" I was smoking as I was walking, so he knew I would have had one. I stopped, and he was already walking towards me as I had, so I started digging one of the many lighters I had out of my bag. I was fully intent on just letting him keep it, I'm not the type to stand with a 30-something-year-old man while he's lighting a cigarette. Then, he asked me for a cigarette, but I'd just lit my last one, which I said. During this whole interaction, he was very close to me, but I was kind of frozen in place. I'd realized that I'd stopped and was stood with a man in a dead street where nobody was around. I was still in the part of town where there isn't housing for another couple of minutes, and if anyone had come out of the pub, I was too far where they wouldn't have seen me. I just started mumbling something like, "Keep the lighter, I've gotta go." But this man who I had spoken to for about 20 seconds told me to just stop a second. And where my feet had started to turn to walk away, I stopped again. Side note, I know I should have just walked away, but I thought maybe it's innocent enough, and I didn't want to give a reason to provoke him if I just walked away from him. This time, his demeanor switched, and he wasn't very polite to start with, but it's like him telling me to stop made him realize that I was a young woman, walking alone at this time of night. I genuinely still get chills thinking about what he said. He looked me up and down and said, "You know, I've been real angry, and I've been waiting for someone to hurt all night. You shouldn't be walking around here alone." My legs literally turned to jelly in that moment. I didn't even know if my phone was in my pocket or in my bag. I looked around and then said, "I'm not alone. My boyfriend is waiting for me around the corner. I will be with him in a minute," and smiled. Just a barefaced lie. My boyfriend was still in the pub and had no clue that this interaction was going on. I thought, maybe I should walk back on myself and go back to the pub. But I just decided not to. My house was closer. The man smirked as if he knew I was chatting absolute bullshit and said he would walk with me to meet my boyfriend. There was no boyfriend waiting for me around the corner. I kept saying there was no need, but he was literally on my tail, rambling about how I don't understand him, I don't get it, I need to walk with him. He wasn't going to hurt me. And this whole time I kept thinking he was going to grab my hair or pull me to the ground, and that any minute he was going to realize there was no boyfriend waiting. I ended up pulling my phone out of my pocket, and it opened to our work group chat, and just typed a message about a man walking with me, realizing my phone was on 2%, and thinking that I just wanted someone to know what was happening. I didn't dare go to call my boyfriend. This guy started mumbling about how I wasn't listening to him. By some miracle, when we turned around the corner onto my street, this guy didn't realize my boyfriend wasn't there. Or maybe he did, but he didn't say anything. He did up his behavior, though, and started spewing the most perverted stuff to me, saying about how I was a pretty young girl. "I bet your boyfriend doesn't know how to handle you." Whole time I wasn't speaking, just speeding up and checking my phone discreetly. I realized that he was going to know where my house was. So I just thought, I'm going to have to pretend one of these houses are mine, otherwise I will be leading him right to my house, where my dad would be asleep at the back of the house, none the wiser. All of the houses on the street had a small gate and footpath leading to the door, so I chose a house with the light on and opened their gate. I turned to the guy and said, "This is me. See you, thanks for walking me," closing the gate behind me. I ran up to their door and shoved my key into the door that was not mine, and prayed that this guy would leave and wouldn't wait for me to go inside the house. Thankfully he didn't, and he started stumbling in the opposite direction, back down the street, away from where my actual house was. In what I thought was my only chance, I opened this gate and sprinted home. This guy clocked what I was doing instantly and started walking in my direction. By the time I got to my house, he had either not caught up quick enough or had given up. When I put my key in my door, I realized my dad had left his in the door internally, meaning I was locked out. I get my phone out, realized that it died in the time we were walking, so I just started banging on the door and my dad let me in after a couple minutes. And that was it. But it was absolutely terrifying. I have not walked home alone since, and my boyfriend was so upset that he didn't push more and let him walk me home. Thankfully, I am okay, and nothing physical happened to me. So random guy that walked me home and said he was looking to hurt someone all night. Please, let's never meet again. Moving to the next one. A stranger has been breaking into my basement for months, and my roommate and I are just gonna let him. Alright, this has been a wild ride, but I am happy to say that as far as I know, he is apparently a sneaky fella, so take this with a grain of salt. This guy hasn't come back for about 8 months, so I think I am in the clear. Here's the story. So about 2 years ago, my 20F and my close friend 20F Moved into a rental house in a mostly safe city. House is nice, rent is expensive, landlords forget we exist. Perfect. A few months later, a super sweet family, mom, dad who's a police officer the next city over, and two young kiddos move in. This is relevant. The house that we live in, I still live here, has a partially finished basement, mostly underground, outside access only, with a couple windows. I say partially finished because the owner told me that a tree fell on the house several years ago and the foundation was built around it, so there is just kind of a big gaping hole in the back of the basement, basically a huge crawl space. The basement is really creepy, has juggalo graffiti, all kinds of random holes in the walls. We never put anything in there besides a few little Christmas decorations and an old recliner I need to get rid of, and because of that, never felt the need to lock it. In the basement is our hot water heater, and a random empty one, not attached to anything that the landlord said has just been there. Another note, the yard is fenced in, and I have a dog who goes between outside and into a doggy door while we're at work all day. He's a mini Aussie, is a threat to no one, and trusts absolutely everyone. He will bark at first, but if you don't hurt him and say a few nice words, he would hand you the keys to my house, car, and safety deposit box if he could. In the yard there's an empty chicken coop left from the owners before the current owners. So not my landlord, but the guy before him. His chicken coop. Both of these things are relevant, I promise. So one day, a few months into living at this house, I'm getting out of my car after work, and neighbor guy, the cop, comes up to me. He tells me that a man in a red truck pulled into the driveway and started trying to get in the backyard. Obviously my neighbor knows that is not myself, my roommate, or my BF, so he asks him what he's doing. He tells my neighbor that he wants to look at the serial number on the hot water heater in my basement. Slay. My neighbor tells him to go away and come back when one of us are home, because he is a nice neighbor, and doesn't know who this dude is trying to get into my yard. Now my landlord drives a red truck, so at this point I'm thinking it was him, and he just forgot to let me know he was coming. So I send him a message. It was not him. I have some back and forth with landlord and neighbor, and we determine that the man was the owner of the house before my landlord. Let's call him Jim. Once we figure this out, landlord tells me he'll get a hold of Jim, figure out what he needs and why he was at the house, and we will go from there. Landlord cannot get a hold of Jim. He does not come back. That is that for several days. Until I'm at work one day, in my car, on my lunch, and my doorbell camera goes off. I open it, say hello, and there are two detectives from a different state knocking on my door. Who are they looking for? Jim. Why are they looking for him? Only because he has warrants for stolen guns. So guys, what did you think? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.